Let's discuss some common pitfalls and struggles for aim training players with some solutions and concepts and processes and approaches. Obviously I love to talk about all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the video, I will be announcing something I'm doing in my community that relates to all these ideas. So stay tuned for that. Or I guess you could just skip ahead because it's YouTube and it's not live. So yeah, fuck me, I guess. Anyway, firstly, why aim train at all? I think, at this point, I'm beating a dead horse to even ask this question because if you're watching my channel, you probably already believe in it. But aim training obviously is just a method of improving some part of our performance in the discipline that we care about, which is FPS games. And so, if you're a football or a soccer player, you're not going to be doing barbell squats on the pitch, but you'll do some barbell squats in the gym because you want to improve your strength, power, endurance, like all these different things. And that's going to be really awesome when you get onto the pitch because you're not going to be able to improve your raw strength in that same fashion as you would be able to in the gym. So the gym is able to kind of optimize for a specific outcome. And so we want to think about aim training the same way. To do this, though, we need to understand what that outcome is or what that goal is. So to do that, I just have to ask the question, why are we aim training? What's the goal? Now, most of you will say, I want really sick aim. Improving my aim is the goal. But what does that mean? Let's unpack it a bit more because I think we can get a little bit more out of it. Techniques, which are formed from skills. So let's say if we have flicking technique, that is a combination of varying, flicking skills that you're putting all together in a way that makes sense with the context of what the context demands. Because there might be a spot where you've got to make a flick shot and you're doing so and the opponent's really far from you. So there's a lot of precision necessary. Maybe your starting position is actually really far away. So it's like a really big flick. So you need to have the precision. You got to have a snappy initial flick. You got to have a clean line. You probably want to be under flicking so that you're in a good spot for a micro correction. You want to have good tension management, so the quality of these movements is really good, and so many of these different things, right? But these are all specific to that context, but these are all just part of your kind of aiming skills, and the technique is putting them all together to make a good flick. So that's what we need to be understanding, is that's what we're trying to achieve. Because if we operate from the base premise that we're trying to improve our aiming habits, I think it begins to change some of the ways that we look at aiming. And we have to ask the question too, why are the habits important in the first place? Now, the habits are important because that's what takes over when you're in the game. So I had this video about missing shots, and I had this video very recently about conscious versus unconscious aim. And so really what that's talking about is how much sort of mental bandwidth is used kind of where and for what. Like, what are you focused on and how are you distributing that focus for what purpose? So in this particular case, the reason why the habits are so important is because we don't want to assign any conscious focus or mental energy at all when we're in the game to aiming. We want our aiming to be operating from habits. And the habits are these kind of pre-coded, pre-rehearsed behaviors that we have practiced. And so then we're in the match, we're just executing that. The habit takes over. We use all of our mental bandwidth to understand the most about what the best decision is, the best timing, the best way to read our opponents, the best play to make. We do all of that, we're communicating, and then we're suddenly in a position where we're confronted by, let's say, the context that I used in my example, that type of flick. That's what you're now confronted with. Or you could be confronted with like a bunch of other scenarios too. And so that's when the aim is supposed to just happen. It just happens. And we know that this is really the case because for any of you who have had this experience of playing at your top level when your aim is really good and everything else, if you have the skill of the metacognition where you're able to be aware of your cognitive processes whilst they're happening. This is a skill, by the way. I had to work on this for various reasons. Maybe that's another video, actually. Most people are not doing that. It is something you have to develop. But if you're able to do that and have that metacognition, so you're aware of your cognition as it's happening, you'll be able to see that you're not thinking or focusing on aim whatsoever. It just happens. It just happens. And that's really one of the only ways you can state it, I suppose. So because of this, what we want to do is now, like, let's look at the way that the process might work for the common average aim trainer player, because there are lots of different processes that you could have to improve your aim. But this is, I would say, like what is intuitive for a lot of people that are either good at learning or just this is like a good default process to kind of start with. And I should say right before we get into what I think is a good default process, what I think is a bad process is no active engagement whatsoever with what you're doing. And a lot of people have this process. You could also call it like passive, like expecting like passive improvements from just putting in time into the game. And I think it's important to state this because I think this actually covers many people. There are many people that would be like, oh, if I just, I get better at the game by just playing it. Okay, well, if I just play and spend time in the trainer, I'll just get better at it. Now, again, like, let's look at the gym. If you have no fucking clue what you're doing in the gym, like, I'm sure some people watching this video don't have experience training, and that's totally fine. I'm not calling you out. But for those of you that have, imagine if you walked into a gym, right, and it's leg day. Go. And not just like because you could say, okay, I'll go to the squat rack and I'm gonna do some. I'm just talking about a lot of leg day right now. I think I'm projecting. I missed leg day this week. I'm projecting. So you know to like get the bar on your back. You can kind of look around. You're seeing other people are doing it. But do you know the alignment? Do you know all of the cues to have the correct positioning throughout the entirety of the movement? Are you going to be using the right resistance, the right volume? Like there are so many things and aspects. Like, do you understand your own physiology and how it interacts with that movement? Because depending on that has massive implications, right? So there's a pretty huge knowledge barrier for you to just start. Aim training is similar. There's a pretty big knowledge barrier to get through to be able to understand what you should be doing. So you can't just expect, like you couldn't expect to just go into the gym and just get results, like a lot of like really good results and high quality results just by walking in and just fucking doing shit without thinking about it. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about my like engine or car analogy here, by looking at what is a good default process that just kind of works. And so the way that a default process might work is it kind of follows a pattern. So what you start with is you start with the car, right? The car is the analogy for your aiming technique here, because you're trying to improve your aiming technique. So you got your car, and your car has lots of components in it. You want your car to go maybe faster, maybe you want it to go more distance, maybe you want it to be more efficient in like, miles to the gallon, whatever it is. So depending on what outcome you're trying to optimize for, you might take out that specific or those specific components that relate to the outcome you're trying to optimize for. So I want the car to go faster. So you take, again, I'm not a mechanic. I know fucking nothing about cars. I honestly don't know why this is the analogy I came up with. So, you take all those things out of the car that are relevant, and then you start kind of optimizing them. You start like working on them and you try to improve them. And then after you've gone through that process, you then put it back in the car and then you're like, okay, let's see if it goes faster now. So similarly with aim training, you observe, and you have to again have the knowledge to do this. You observe what about your technique requires work and improvement. Where are your weaknesses? What do you want to work on? What are your objectives? And so then what you'll do is you'll go into the aim trainer and you'll spend, again, like all this conscious energy in isolating those movements so that. And let's think about the habit thing. We talked about how important habit forming is. You have by default, and this is why the passive approach is kind of horrible, you have by default just a way that you aim. So you need, in order to have higher quality habits behind all of this, you need to get high quality reps with the corrected technique and with the corrected skills that go into that technique to correct the technique, right? So what you need to do here is have all this conscious focus on like, all right, I've identified I've got to have clean lines on my flicks between A and B. So you're just like really focusing on like feeling it. Like, okay, I got it right. Okay, got it wrong, got it right, got it wrong. That was good, that was bad. And you're just like trying to just really focus on that. You're not thinking about playing for scores. You're correcting technique. That is what you're trying to do. Correcting the skill that then goes into the technique, I should say. So that's what you're doing. So then eventually you feel like, oh, I feel pretty good. Like I'm actually able to do this thing. I've rehearsed this a lot and I'm like feeling really good about this. Let's put it back in the car. So the version of then driving the car in this case is hitting the benchmark. If you're an aim trainer player, because the benchmarks are like your match day, the benchmarks are there to then change, your attention, not on, oh, I'm just going to correct and make this very high quality and perfect. You're not thinking about every part of those individual movements. You're now optimizing for score. So you've got to put speed in there. You've got to put all the techniques in together. You're going to be doing a scenario that combines a lot of these skills. and you've just reinserted that, the skills that you have practiced, and now you're going to go for it. Now, there is some level of like conscious focus happening because as you have heard me say, your aim tends to perform the best when your brain is kind of like not thinking really about it at all consciously. But you need to have your brain be a kind of referee, because you want it to be the case that as you're pushing speed, what will naturally happen is technique will worsen. So you need to kind of be conscious about it, because, and the way I kind of describe this is your brain becomes kind of like you become kind of like a referee. So what is a referee's job? So a referee is on the pitch, but the referee is only making sure that all of the players conform to the rules of the game. So there may be long stretches where the referee doesn't have to do anything, and some stretches where the referee has to enforce some of the boundaries, hold up a yellow card to make sure that everything can kind of flow as it should. And this is the same case, I would say, is that you need some focus just to make sure that you are continuing to execute with the improved habits and techniques, but you do not want to be like fully focused like you are when you're correcting technique and you don't care about your performance for, and that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to push scores. So now you've gone through your process, you've driven the car, you've tested it for speed, you've done your benchmarks, you've hit a new high score. But then now you're going to see that you're stuck. There's some part of the movement, there's something about your technique that's not working. So now you go back into the lab, you try to analyze, where you're failing. Maybe you look at replays of players playing these types of scenarios and you see where they are doing better than you. Maybe like there's certain aspects of what they're doing, like, their first flick is like really snappy, or their ability to go from targets is really, really, really good, or they're able to like go really fast between like clustered targets. Like there's like, you might notice something, and now you have a point of investigation, this next kind of journey for you to improve your flicking aim. And so then you'll do the whole process all over again. You take out that component of the car, you start working on it really consciously, you try to kind of get it into a better spot, then you kind of put it back in, and then you go and test it again. So this is a highly iterative process. And I need to highlight how the relationship is between all of this and the game. Because we're now starting to really get into the pitfalls. So I've kind of discussed some of the important concepts and some of the processes and kind of how we go about them. But now it's time to really discuss some of these pitfalls. So the first pitfall here is transferring into the game. This is a huge question, and creating this link where there's maybe some kind of like seamlessness between aim training performance and performance in the trainer and what you're doing in the trainer and the game. This is like the $1 million question for a lot of people, because they're like, well, I'm not seeing the benefits like I feel like I should be. And this is interesting because we have to understand what is different about the environments. I already mentioned how there is a different cognitive load, whereas, in the aim trainer, there's almost there's no cognitive load, essentially. There's nothing happening. The only thing that's happening is you putting your inputs into the game. There's nothing coming back out of the game, really. Obviously, if there are some scenarios where targets are moving, okay, there is some information, but it's just not comparable to the in-game scenario where the amount of information, the amount of decisions that are coming at you are astronomically large. And so with that said, the state of your attention and focus is completely different. And so this is one of the reasons why we tend to lag in terms of the improvements that we see that we're making in the aim trainer and then seeing those in the game. There is a lag. This lag happens because, again, what is happening? How does aim work in the game? Habits. So the problem is, by playing the game, we might fall into old habits. So because we can't actively focus on the aim or like referee our aim, like I've described. So this seems like I've just described like a conundrum, like a catch-22. Like, how do you solve this? Like, you can't sort of consciously focus on it, but at the same time, you're just falling into like the old habits. Like, how do you solve that? So the answer, I think, with regards to this is you solve it through consistency. This is honestly, it's like one of the most important things, and it's one of the biggest failures that most people experience, myself included, is consistency. Because there are many enemies of consistency, many enemies indeed, that will harm your ability to be consistent. I'm going to talk about one of them. Okay. We've got another analogy, so strap in, because I'm so good at my analogies. Being sarcastic. Anyone who didn't get that. So people get discouraged because their framing of the whole problem is often wrong. What does that mean? Well, the framing should be instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And this is where the problem is. We're often expecting to get gratified much more quickly than is ever realistic. And especially with something like technique work, it can sometimes take weeks or months to see significant improvements. But once you get over the hump, it can kind of, really start to, you really start to see a lot of improvements. But that's how it can happen sometimes. And so we have to be able to weather this. And so to do so, we can't be thinking short term. We have to expand our thinking to a year. Like if I take myself, and I'm going to the cringe analogy, yeah, but I'll get there in a sec. But if I take myself as an example here, if I look at my YouTube channel and I look at the last like month or something, I'll be like, fuck. I just one word, fuck. No, but seriously, I'd be pretty discouraged because my stats are not nearly as good, and I haven't had as many videos that have really like popped off in the way that I wanted. I put lots of effort into certain things, and maybe I didn't get the return I wanted. If I just look at that month, in isolation, then yeah, it kind of sucks. But if I look at the 6 months, I'm like, oh, in 6 months, I've increased the size of the channel by 50%, which is like, over 10,000 subscribers, like, all these different things. Like I had all these different successes. I had this like one video go really viral, like the mini god video. So that's like 250K views. That's amazing. That's really crazy. Like there's lots of like really cool achievements that have actually been made and lots of movement that's actually happened. So even though, so I can't really realistically, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't respect reality to just look at the month sample. But the reason that happens is because that is how our human brains like want to operate. It's the same thing. Here's a cringe example, like diet. Like if you guys have ever tried to manage your weight or like anything like that, there's like two approaches. There's like the best approach, and that's boring and no one wants to do it, but everyone knows it's the best approach, versus all the approaches that everyone wants to take that are not nearly as good. So what does that mean? Well, it's the like all of the extreme diets and the fad diets and all these kinds of things can be really good because people love to think that they can get results in the short term. And the short term, even with dieting and stuff, is obviously like, couple months, 2-3 months. And that's actually feels like a very long time for most people. And especially this is the issue with the fad diets, is that they can be so extreme that that it's the case that it's like so hard to have adherence to. And so then you get this problem that you invested in this thing for a couple of weeks and then it fails, and you're like, because you couldn't adhere to it because it's so strict, and then you're like, fuck, I feel really discouraged and disappointed, and I didn't get the results I wanted. But I've invested 2 weeks. So now I'm going to think of like, okay, well, what's the next like quick fix? Because I want to fix now. I like, it's like sunk cost fallacy to a certain extent as well. And so the best answer that probably anybody that, wants to lose weight could tell you that they understand is like the best way to lose weight in a healthy way for, is to change your lifestyle significantly, have a caloric deficit over like a long period of time, just eat good quality food, get good quality sleep, don't be like manage your stress, like all of these things that are like, okay, well, a year or 2 or 3 year horizon for success. But then you will see those people that are like, for whatever reason, they summon the strength to do that. And it's like extremely inspiring and impressive. We all feel that way because that's what it is. It's because we all recognize how hard it is as human beings that are constantly programmed to just hit the dopamine buttons, the instant gratification switches that we have everywhere now. We just want to do that. So by framing things a bit differently, we can actually have a lot more success here. Because if you expect to get results from aim training in a short time period, and that short time period is, I'm going to tell you, it could be like 3, 4, 5, 6 months is a short time period. If you're expecting to get significant results in that time, it may or may not happen. You need to not think about it in that way. It needs to just be a part of what you're doing. It just needs to be a part of your process to be better as a player. And you need to find ways to enjoy that process. So this is definitely, I think, another video I'll make, but there's a video I learned a lot on this topic about in terms of motivation and work from Huberman. He has an amazing, he has loads of content now about the dopaminergic system and how it works for motivation and these varying things. So I think it might be cool to kind of like rehash that into sort of esports lingo so that we can kind of make that more accessible for all of you guys. With the esports examples and so on, but overall, like, we need to just be able to enjoy the process. That's very important with when it comes to delayed gratification. Anything, you've got to find ways to enjoy what you're actually doing. Okay, so consistency is, because this is the other thing, right? I'll also say about consistency. because consistency of aim or consistency of anything is really, really hard. And the answer is actually the circular definition, which is to be consistent, you must be consistent, right? So to be consistent with your performances, you have to be consistent in all of your inputs that go into your performances. Then you will be consistent. This is really important. Now, I will make another video. God, there's so many videos to make, which is great. I love this problem. This is a great problem to have. But the ABC game video that I've been trying to like figure out how to make for a long time, this will also help to cover this quite significantly, I would say, because a large part of the ABC game system that I got from Jared Tendler is about solving for consistency. That is a large part of what it is, because at the very top level, that is like everyone has a really high ceiling, but it's who hits that ceiling the most and who has the lowest or the highest floor. These are the players that will obviously perform the best overall. So very important topic. Okay, so and I just want to expand on it very briefly, because I can't just mention consistency without a bit more of an expansion. So the consistency is important because if, let's say, you're trying to change your habit and you're feeding some garbage data, every time you're doing that, or garbage behaviors, every time you're doing that, you're creating a less consistency, right? So every time you go into your aim trainer and you're not like really, there's no objective, you're not paying attention, then what's happening? What is your technique doing? Like, what's happening to your technique? You should have a really good sense as to where your technique is in like every single category. Like, you should really understand that. And so you should be able to play a flicking task and be able to be like, oh, like this is like a bad habit I used to have, or like this is the correct habit. Like, you should know all of these different things. You should be able to look at it and understand. And the reason is because that will allow you to, again, keep yourself honest with how consistent you are with your execution of your techniques. Because if you are practicing bad techniques, then how can you ever hope to be consistent or to improve that aspect of your play? And in the long term, if we're talking about the delayed gratification, the consistency in the aim training itself is the solution to basically everything. Because if we have this as part of our process, we're trying to build habits. So having it as essentially a career-long habit will help us be able to continue to train volume with high-quality technique. This is something we don't get the opportunity to do as much in game. So once we start making some good gains with that, once we start getting the good gains in the game, which will eventually happen, it will start to compound. The benefits will start to compound, and you'll start to make progress much more quickly than you would otherwise have had. And one way that you can also look at this as well is that if you choose to not even think about consistency whatsoever, or just the quality of the habits, you could just go backwards as well. Like, spending time playing, you could actually be reinforcing or creating new habits that are bad, creating new ones because you don't understand that they're bad. And also, if you're not paying attention, you don't even know what you're doing. So it could end up being garbage, and that's why you're not improving. So lots of things to consider there with regards to consistency in the training itself and consistency in understanding what your technique is actually doing. So the next problem, I would say, is knowledge, the knowledge problem. So if you're walking into aim training and you don't know what's going on, yeah, it can be kind of intimidating, because you already mentioned, like with the gym, you've got to have some knowledge of what's going on. And I would say there's two ways to approach this problem. Now, one way is analysis, you doing your own analysis. So you asking the question, and you can start really basic, like what is good and what is bad. Like, so, we could get into the philosophy of morality, right there, but because that's what obviously that's about. It's about how do you determine for human beings what good and bad actually means. But in this particular context, you can say, and you align yourself with the objective. So what is good or bad? Well, the good things help me get to the objective. So to win the round, so elimination or planting the bomb, or like getting more kills than my opponent, like whatever the game is, the objective is what you orient everything around to understand whether it's good or bad. If it's bad, well, bad aim, bad decision making, like these things take you further away from getting to the objective. Good aim, good mechanics, good awareness, game sense, good decision making. These things bring you all closer to the objective. So we've got some really basic things there. But if we take our aim, we can do again the same thing. We can say, okay, well, my aim is bad. I need to improve my aim. Let's look at what aim is. And if you're able to start defining what aim is, okay, I got a flick. That's a flick. The big flicks are good. The smaller flicks not so good. You're starting to like have some kind of you're able to color in at least some of the details. So now you're starting to see a picture as to what actually is going on. And now with that picture, you can say, okay, what are the things I need to now learn? So, okay, I need to learn a way to train for this problem, because now you've just identified a problem. And over time, obviously, your analysis gets better as you increase your knowledge. And you can increase your knowledge by asking questions and working with the principles, or you can do research. That also will help you to gain knowledge. So there's lots of amazing content channels out there. I do so much aiming content. You've got Minigod, you've got Matty, you've got Viscose, you've got Bardos. I don't know that he's making anything right now, but he used to make a lot of content for aiming. You've got Cartoon. There's a lot of really legit people that are dispensing ample amounts of aiming theory, so that you can go and look at those videos and you can start to absorb some of the terminology. You can understand what it means. You'll start to connect the dots, and this will take you on your journey, because you'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's something that, that's a way of describing flicking, or that I can go and like think about, or that's an approach for flicking that I can go and use. So you'll start to like really pick up a lot of stuff through that way as well. And it's just a process. And the more you do it over time, obviously, the easier you can kind of solve for that problem. And then that's going to help you with your consistency, because the consistency in the training sometimes drops off because you don't know what you're doing. And so that makes sense, right? Like the whole point is that you're doing this to get benefits in the game. That's the whole point for most people, at least. There are like aim trainer mains, but assuming you're not an aim trainer main, you're doing it so you can get better in the game that you want to play. So if you don't know why you're even training, like if you don't know what you're training, or you're not seeing any return, you're very likely going to become inconsistent, because you don't see the value. And you can easily say, well, I'll just get more value playing the game, which is true, especially if you know how to improve in the game. Obviously, you can actually become worse by playing the game. If when I kind of already touched on that a little bit, the whole point of this is to improve at the actual game specifically. So one thing we have to understand is, like I said, we need the right perspective. We need to look at this as like a long-term delayed gratification. It's just what I do. It's just a part of my process. That's one thing that we need to do. We also need, and the reason is because the success in the game lags, because we've talked about this unconscious, conscious aim thing. You don't really have much mental bandwidth at all to spare in the game on aiming. You just don't. So what we just need to do is we just need to be patient, because the aim training gains will actually go quicker than the gains in the game actually. And then as you continue to play, you will start to connect the dots. You will start to your improvements that you're making in the aim trainer will actually start to confer into the game. And sometimes it's not even as noticeable, but over time it will work. You just have to think about this very long term time horizon, as opposed to anything that's short term. And like I said, like short term, I could even say is like 2-3 months. Like you really need to commit to this for like a long period of time, and to see the improvements that you want to make. And so you also want to look at it as like separate things as well. Like, how can you be good at aim trainers? Because being good at aim trainers is actually just being good at improving your aiming technique, which is obviously that's what you're wanting to do is to improve that, so that you have better habits that kick in when you're playing in game. So the improvements are incremental. As you're going over that process we talked about earlier, just incremental improvements upon incremental improvements. You'll often find that you'll have questions at the end of each of these processes, or even during the processes. And so every time you get a question, you go and try to find out the information. You talk to people, you ask people stuff, and you try to connect all the dots. And with that said, I think we've kind of covered quite a lot of topics here. 30 minutes, my God, I am just... What is wrong with me? So with all that said, here is the announcement. And fuck, if you just skipped to this, I think you probably did yourself a favor. I had no idea this would be 30 minutes. Anyway, so I'm going to be doing an aiming community challenge, or a community aiming challenge on my Discord, my DDK's gym. And that link for Discord is in my description. And so you can jump in there. There will be a channel, and this will commence on the 28th of June. So that's this Friday. And it is just going to be an experiment to begin with. But what we're going to be doing is you guys will commit to training or aim training for 30 days. And my minimum that I'm expecting, and again, I'm not going to police you, so if you don't do it, I mean, fucking hell, up to you. But if my minimum is 5 days per week, because the whole purpose is trying to have consistency in the aim training, is trying to habituate all of this, because 30 days is really enough to set a habit. And so what we want to do is also have the community energy there that can be provided, so you guys can improve alongside others. You can share goals, you can ask questions, you can get people to look at your VODs. So yeah, if you're not sure you're on the right track, or if you're not sure about like what you're doing or any of these things, you have people to kind of share with you in that. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of great opportunities for people to teach others, as well as opportunities for us to motivate each other through the progress that we're making. So I will end the video by saying what my goals are, because again, as I said, this is just about us all AIM training together for 30 days, 5 days per week. That's the only sort of rules to this challenge. And in the future, I would like to scale this up. If people like this and people are into it and it grows, I'll scale this up, and maybe I can get some sponsors and make it more of a competition somehow, kind of figure it out. But the first one is to see how it goes. And there's no time like the present. I haven't been able to do much training at all the last couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to making some gains. And my goals are still master complete. I'm really close. I just need to get my static scores up. And then if I manage to achieve that, I have my next tier of goal, which is the next rank on the benchmark, which will take me into the advanced part of the benchmark. So start to get really serious. So with all of that said, thank you so much for listening to me for 30 minutes. You guys are crazy. And I hope that this was valuable. I would love to hear what you found the most valuable, or if there's any videos where you'd like me to see me make, or ideas you want to see me expand upon. But I think that about does it for now. So cheers. Have a good one.